Welcome to For the Love of Books, a podcast by North Lanarkshire Libraries. Hi everyone, welcome back to the North Lanarkshire Libraries podcast For the Love of Books. My name is Chris Wilson, the E-Services Librarian, and tonight I am joined with two book bloggers who are Gordon McGee, who is behind the blog Grab That Book, and Sharon who is behind the blog Chapter in My Life, and she is also a published author as well, so we'll talk a little bit more about her book a little bit later as well. Thank you very much for joining me on the podcast tonight, guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting us.
You are very welcome, and we thought we'd invite you guys on because everybody knows librarians love books, but there's other people out there that love books as well, and probably behind librarians, book bloggers are probably the biggest lover of books behind us. So, or maybe you would argue they're more so, but you're definitely book lovers anyway. So it's good to have you another different take on books and see what you guys are into, and also get a little bit behind what got you into blogging and things like that as well. So, as book bloggers, you're obviously big, massive book lovers, and can you remember what really sparked that love of books off? What was the first book that really kind of grabbed you? Sharon, what was your kind of original book that really kind of took your heart to?
I think I'll probably be the same as any book blogger you ever speak to. You know, I've read from an early age. I've read from the minute I can remember reading. My dad was a huge reader, so he instilled that love of reading in me, and I went through the usual Enid Blyton and everything. But I think for me, I was thinking about that today, and I thought I used to go to Montrose. My dad's aunt had a cottage up in Montrose called Smuggler's Den, and it was a wee tiny old cottage right next to the port, and she always had loads of books. All our family were big readers, and it was Agatha Christie. So she always had piles of Agatha Christie books. So it was Agatha Christie, and I can't for the life of me now remember the name of it, but it will come back to me at a random point in my life. But yeah, Agatha Christie, that's what really got me hooked at that sort of age where I could go out and start really getting into books.
That little cottage sounds fantastic as well. It sounds like a lovely place to fall in love with books.
It was, yeah.
What about yourself, Gordon? Do you have one that really sticks out as the first one that really kind of made you love books?
I think Sharon's copied my notes because it's almost word for word what I'd have said.
Were you the Smuggler's Den too? Were you the ghost?
Apart from the Smuggler's, all right, okay, you can have the Smuggler's Den, but everything else. No, I was the same. I can remember just from a young age, I was always surrounded by books, and the earliest book I can remember, we had a book that was handed from me year on year on year. It was a story for every night of the year. So every night, this big old hardback book would get brought out. You'd find that day's story, and it'd be some nights it'd be like 5 lines of a poem. The next night it'd be a page and a half of stories. So you never quite were sure what you were going to get. But I must have gone through that book for 3 or 4 years before my sister finally took it off me, and it was quite away. But I mean, I always read. It was, you know, from that story and all the Mr. Men books back in the day, and the Timbuktu ones as well, which was the animal version of the Mr. Men. And then we moved on to Secret Seven and the Five Find Outers and all the Enid Blyton ones that you get, and even the ones that nobody talks about anymore, which are the Ragamuffin Mystery and the Rat-a-Tat Mystery, which were a completely different series that nobody seems to remember, but fond memories of them. But I had the same. I got to a point where my aunt had a complete collected Agatha Christie collection and lovely red hardback books, and there was like two books per volume. So I think I borrowed them like over a course of a summer holiday, just went straight through the whole collection, all the Poirots, all the Marples, all the random standalones, which I hated because I didn't have Poirot or Marple in them. I was like, where are they? You know. So yeah, it was very much that discovery of moving from the transgenerational kids books into what I thought was adult books at the time in the Agatha Christie's, and then from that point on there was no stopping me.
Fantastic. And so obviously that kind of instilled a right good love of reading in you, and I think Agatha Christie's probably done that with a lot of people. But what was it that made you, that both of you, want to start blogging about books? Because obviously that's taken kind of that love of reading to a kind of new level and kind of putting your thoughts of what each book you read out there and things like that sort of stuff. So Sharon, what was it that kind of got you started in wanting to do that?
I think social media. It had to be social media. Joined Facebook many years ago, before I was on social media before all the young ones were. So yeah, but quickly got bored of all the stuff that was going on social media and found some book groups.
Yeah.
I thought, oh, this looks good. There's lots of people out there that like reading. It's not just me. So joined a few book groups, and I used to see all these things coming up. Oh, check out my blog for my review in this, or a blog tour here, or I'm interviewing this author. And I thought, well, this looks really interesting. And I'd already set up a blog. I had this, I was delusional one day and thought that, I would like to do a lifestyle blog. So Chapter of My Life was essentially a lifestyle blog at one point, but then quickly realised that I was a bit too boring to do a lifestyle blog. So it just sort of lay there. And I thought, I'm going to use that and use it for a book blog. So that's how blogging came along. It was social media, getting to know other bloggers, and I think I just really connected with a lot of people through that forum, and getting to know folk that like the same things as me, and just being able to have those discussions. Social media then became fun as opposed to this sort of negative energy draining place that it could be. So yeah.
It's funny. I think most people have that thought about the lifestyle blog thing and think, yeah, that sounds like a really good idea. And then you realise after 3 days of sitting in your own house thinking this isn't going to be a very interesting blog for anyone. Gordon, what about yourself? What got you into blogging? What was the reason for that?
Oh, I came from a totally different angle. I've always read, and when I finish a good book, I want someone else to enjoy that book as well. So it was almost kind of the urge to pass on this, oh, you've got to read this, that whole sharing experience. And my family and like close circle of friends, such where don't read as much as me. A couple of them are doing not a bad keeping up, but on the whole, if I'm reading 5 or 6 books, they're maybe reading one of them, and I'm like, no, there's more, you got to hurry up. So I would go into my office. I worked in quite a big office for a while, and there's about 250 people always on one site, and we were all chatting about summer holidays, and I was recommending different books to people, and then they come back their holidays raving about how good it was, and the buzz of recommending something and having someone come back going, do you know what, that book, you were right, it was great, I loved it, and my wife read it as well. And so that kind of was where I wanted to get to, and I didn't know how to do it. And it was my wife's idea one day just to set up a blog and try just putting a website together, and that's how Grab This Book came about. It was just I'm going to start this, and I'd just finished a book, and I thought, well, why don't I write about this book I've just finished? And it was James Oswald's Natural Causes, which was the first of his series, which I think he's up to book 12 now, which shows how long I've been going. So that was just over 8 years ago, because I'm just into my 9th year of doing this now, so it's been a while. But yeah, it was just literally pick a book, read it, talk about it, and then hit Twitter and say, I've just read this book and it was great, and that's grown and grown over the years. So
yeah, definitely that sharing that love of books as well. I think when you're a reader, you really want to connect with other readers, and you want other readers to get the same feel for a book, or you want to know what it is about a book that gives them the buzz, so that you can pick up there. So yeah, definitely I would agree with that as well. It's about sort of sharing that book love.
Yeah, that's something that transfers over with staff, library staff as well, because that's something that we get a lot as well. Obviously, a lot of library staff read a lot of books, and we like kind of passing on what we like, and you get that kind of feedback back from customers as well. So it's very, very similar actually in terms of how that works. Sorry, Gordon, were you going to say something there?
I said what I was going to say was basically what you're saying. It's the ability, especially in North Lanarkshire. I think North Lanarkshire must be the only one of regional councils that doesn't have a bookshop. I can't think of one. And it's, if you're not in the supermarket, if you're not getting your books in supermarket shelves, there's brilliant books out there. Don't get that opportunity to get up. So the library becomes such a key resource, because it puts these books that, the hidden gems and the absolute diamonds that are out there. I mean, there's so many of them, and they just don't get the exposure that I think they should be getting. So, that's why, at the heart of any community, a good library that's got all these books in them is wonderful. And then if we can say to people, go to the book, this is the book you want to read, and go and find it, and they come to it yourselves as a library, and that's even better.
Fantastic, and thank you very much for that lovely plug about libraries, Gordon. Your check's in the post. Now, one of the things that I do love about both your blogs is the fantastic names of the blogs, because I think that's also a very important thing as well, to make the name very catchy and memorable and things like that sort of stuff. So where did the names come from? Was there a lot of thought went into that for you, Gordon? Where did Grab That Book come from?
Well, it's Grab This Book, which is...
Grab This Book.
Desperation, I think. I just wanted something. I thought, what am I going to get? I'd been online, and it was back a long time ago. There weren't quite anywhere near as many blogs out there, so we had a little bit more flexibility. And I kind of looked at what was out, and I thought, well, I wanted to make sure it's books, and I want to have a sense of urgency of like, this is one you shouldn't miss, or unmissable books. And I thought, if you see a really good book, grab it. And I thought, well, how about Grab This Book? And it sat fine at the time. I think if I was to do it again now, I would go somewhere different, but I've got no idea where. I was having a chat. I got a new team at work, and they were talking about names, and I said I'm sometimes known as Grab online, which is never the best way to be known among strangers, but it works. So, and it sits well with the G of my name for Gordon and Grab. I just sign myself G quite a lot, so it all nestles nicely in identifiers, but. Yeah, it was just a case of one night I needed a name, and that was what I came up with after about half an hour. And I thought, right, that'll do. Let's just get this started.
And Sharon, I guess yours goes back to that lifestyle thing.
Yeah, it's that whole lifestyle thing where you think, all right, okay, it wasn't so much a lifestyle as in social media influencers these days. It was more like diary of the chaos that is my life sometimes, that I thought it was quite interesting, but then I think I actually only ever wrote one post and didn't actually post it anywhere. So the chapter in my life came from that, but then obviously it fitted in very well with the book blog. Like Gordon though, if I was to do it again, I would probably change the name. I would probably have something a wee bit more themed. I mean, I'm a particular lover of sort of crime fiction, psychological fiction, so I would probably try to sort of tailor it towards that. But I'm chapter in my life, and I'm not changing it now. So that's where I am.
I think it's one of the things, when it's your thing, you can get a bit bored of it after a while. Yeah. But they are actually great names for the blogs, so I think you've done well picking them. So I highly recommend not changing them. I think they're fantastic.
No, I won't change them. Too much hard work.
Now, as you touched on, Gordon, you've both been doing this for a long time. I think you're a couple of years away from your 10th anniversary, which is an amazing amount of time to be doing blogging. Has there ever been any times that it's felt like a bit of a struggle, or felt like kind of giving up a little bit, or has it always kind of came quite natural to do it? Gordon, what yourself?
Oh, it definitely goes in waves. There's times when I'm very active in reading, and I'm sharing lots of reviews, and I feel I'm just constantly churning out new reviews. Then there's times when I'm like, nothing happens for a week, and I think, okay, I should possibly think about putting some words on a page. And it can. I mean, the nature of my work is I'm a contractor, so I kind of change roles quite frequently, which is always quite entertaining. I know people who've been in the same job for 20, 30 years, and they're horrified by the prospect of me doing 6 months here, 10 months there, and it's just how it works. But when you change job, you have a lot to learn, and it's all different, and you come home and you're exhausted, and the last thing you want to do is pick up a book and then a laptop. And so yeah, there's lulls when maybe a role changes, but the last 2 years is a prime example of why the reading mojo, as they call it, sometimes just disappears, and you think, no, do I really want to be throwing anything out into the ether at the moment? It's not exactly the best of times. So yeah, it definitely goes in waves, but I've seen many blogs start up and finish, and the stuff that they've done, I think, much better than I've ever managed to put out. But it's just a shame that not everyone can keep it going, and I'm sort of scrabbling by, and I'm just happy I'm still able to get some things out there that people want to read. But the love of it's never gone, and that's the thing that what drives it on. I still love my books. I love sharing it, so that's what keeps it going, really.
Yeah, and Sharon, what about yourself?
Yeah, just absolutely, Gordon. That whole that idea of, does it get challenging? I think it does get challenging for a lot of reasons. As Gordon says, your life gets busy. Work gets busy, family life gets busy, things get in the way, and I think sometimes as bloggers, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves because we want to share the book love. And I think especially where it's lesser known authors, smaller authors that are maybe not out in the supermarkets, not in the Richard and Judy shelves. You want to really champion people. Yeah. And you get a lot of requests a lot of the time, and at the beginning you're like you just absolutely soak up everything, you take everything, and you do all those reviews, but there comes a point where you think, I can't actually do this. I can't read every book, and I can't share every review. So, but I think you've got to get to a place where you're comfortable and being able to say, no, I'm sorry, I can't do that. But like Gordon, I think it's the love of it that keeps me going. I think at the beginning, I used to have reviews out 3-4 times a week. Now I can go a month without putting out a review, and I store them all up and think, right, I really need to sit down and write these reviews. But I don't think I would stop it. I've slowed down, but I don't think I would stop it. I don't think, because I love doing it. It's great fun.
I do think it takes a lot of dedication to keep it going. I mean, I have to confess, I have tried blogging a few times and doing book blogs, and after maybe like one or two, I'm one of those ones that disappears after 1 or 2 posts because life just gets in the way, and
it is time consuming, because I mean, when I first started, I don't think I ever hashtagged anything. I just put my blogs out there, and people shared them. Now you're like, right, who do I need to tag? What hashtags do I need to use? What graphics do I need to put in this? What other information about the book? So actually putting that post together, it isn't just a case of sitting writing, this book was great, go and grab it off the shelf and read it. You've got to really think about what you're writing and what content you're putting in there. So yeah, it does take a lot of time, but it's good fun. Okay. Not writing.
And talking about that great content, one of the things that I love about your blog, Gordon, is the series that you have called Decades. Now, do you want to tell us a little bit more about Decades and what it is? Because it's a little bit different from just a regular blog.
Yeah, Decades, it's actually quite bizarre because my first Decades guest was actually Sharon, which is I'm really, Sharon's we'll get to, but Sharon wrote a book and it came out during lockdown. And I was devastated I couldn't be there for launch parties and stuff, all these things that we sometimes get to go to. So I came up with this idea for a feature called Decades, and I thought, well, I need guests, and I'll explain what Decades is. But this was something happened in real world away from books, which made me think, and it's not a particularly happy story, so I'll not dwell on that, but it basically said, if you had to have a library, a brand new library, with 0 books on the shelves, none of the old classic westerns and Mills and Boon that everyone loves, but not everyone goes to. If you wanted nothing but the best books in this library, the very best, the ones that people love to bits, which books would you put in that library? And I thought, I couldn't do that because I read crime and I would miss out classics. I wouldn't put any Jane Austen in, and there would be absolute carnage from a large population of the reading. So I thought, well, how am I going to get the best books? What would you do? You'd have to ask other people. Well, who do you ask? Well, you ask people that love books. So I came up with the idea of this little series, which was meant to run for maybe 5 or 6 weeks, just to keep the blog ticking over and a bit of fun, get some of my friends to come on, chat about books a bit, and it went down very well. So what I did was I said to people, which books would you put in my ultimate library, my Decades library? And the reason I call it a Decades library is because they're allowed to pick any 5 books of any type, but they have to pick 1 book from a decade for 5 consecutive decades. Okay?
You made it very difficult for us.
I do make it tricky. It makes you think, because what I didn't want to have happen was for someone to go, oh, I like the Harry Potter books, I'll pick 5 of them. Boom. And then there's no... That's great, but there's no conversation in there. There's no thinking about it. Or someone whose pal's written 5 books, they're good friends with another author, I'll just name check all their books. And again, there's no variety. So I thought, how can I make it a bit more diverse? So I set this challenge of 1 book per decade for 5 consecutive decades. So you've got a 50-year publication span, but if you pick, I think, Sharon, your first book was a Stephen King from the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
So after that, where do you go? Well, you go to the 80s or you go to the 60s, and from then on you have to then start thinking, well, which book would I pick from the 80s? And it just makes people think of it more. I think the fact that it does make people think of it more makes it a bit more fun for people, and people have discovered this series because it's been running now. The 5 weeks I thought it would run for, I'm currently on the 16th month, so it's been running. I've had nearly 200. Is it 200 guests? No, it can't be. It must be about 60 or guests, but about 200 different books have been recommended. So there's some popular authors who come up quite frequently. There's some titles come up quite frequently, but the variety of stuff we get is amazing. So I think the oldest book we have is Dracula, I think, off the top of my head, going all the way back to the late 1800s. There's a couple of Agatha Christie's from the 20s. And then the most recent book was actually published this year, 2022. So there's been a real range of loves from authors, publishers, bloggers, journalists. I've had lots of guests. And every Friday is Decades Day. And that's when the new post goes up with my next guest and the next 5 books. And it's proving quite popular.
And there's even been a library staff member in there as well, I noticed. So we won't name which one, but if anyone goes to the post, they can try and figure out which one might be a library staff member in there.
It's a great thing to do, though, because even when I was doing mine and just thinking back to the decades and thinking back to the books, it triggered lots of memories. When I was picking the book, you get lots of memories associated with different books. So although I said it was a challenge to do, it was a challenge to do. It's always a challenge to pick, 5 favourite books, but it's a really good thing to do. It's a brilliant series.
It goes 2 ways from my point of view, because I send out the invitation saying, do you fancy doing this? And people have either seen it and go, oh, definitely, I've been thinking about what I'd pick. Or explain it and they go, oh, that's quite good. And then you get the email back, which either says, this was brilliant, I loved it, I had such fun, I picked some of my childhood favourites and it's brought back so many happy memories, and that's great. Or you get the email back that goes, does it have to be from consecutive decades? Yes. Oh, I'll not name him personally, but there's a sci-fi author who's written a fantasy series anyway, who's written a few fantasy novels, and I just got one email back that just said, you monster. Fair enough. So yeah, the five books, 5 decades can be a bit of a tricky challenge, but everyone seems to enjoy it, and it does seem to, and that's the best thing for me, is it makes people visit books that they loved, and then they share it, and people go, oh, I remember that book, I loved it, and it starts a chat on Twitter, which is where I share them more, and that's lovely too, because people join in, and it makes, I get accused of swelling people's TBR piles, the to be read piles, because people see a book and go, oh, that sounds amazing, and they go and buy it, and they've got another book to read. So it's a lovely sharing community that I think we get from that, which I'm really delighted to be part of.
Yeah, it's definitely a lovely idea, and so I think I should probably maybe think of something along those lines and actually steal it for our podcast as a wee section in our podcast. Maybe that could be an idea, but that may be putting people a little bit on the spot without kind of prior warning if they didn't have time.
You need to
think on their feet.
It's really hard to wing it.
Now, one of the things I wanted to ask you guys as well about was blog tours as well, because blog tours is quite a big thing for authors these days. Some of our listeners might not really know what a blog tour is, so I thought I would ask you if you guys have been involved in any blog tours, and if so, can you kind of give maybe our listeners a little bit of background of what it actually is, and also reveal maybe who your favourite blog tour was that you've been involved in. Sharon, what about yourself?
Okay, I've got a confession to make. I have been involved in blog tours ever since it started, but when I first started blogging, I thought a blog tour was a real live tour where a blogger toured the country with their favourite author. And I was so jealous of all these bloggers going around the UK with their favourite author. Then somebody put me right and told me what a blog tour was. So don't be too hard on yourself, anybody who thinks that's what a blog tour is. A blog tour is basically, it's an online programme of book reviews. It takes place over a defined period of time, so it can be anything from a week up to a month. I think probably a month's about the longest blog tour that you would have. And it's used to promote the author's book. bloggers sign up to be a part of a blog tour, and they agree that on a certain day they will post either a book review, an interview with the author, or an excerpt from their book. And with the interview from the author is you normally send over the blog tour organizer a list of questions or over to the publisher. The author answers them and you put them up in your blog. So it's a promotional tool used by authors and publishers to raise a bit of buzz about a book. And it can be used for books that are just coming out, or authors sometimes arrange blog tours for books that have been out for a wee while.
And it shows how important publishers kind of value the book blogging community as well, because it's become, like you said, it is a big promotional tool for them to do that. So, Gordon, have you been involved in any of this that's kind of been like a really big favourite of yours, or that kind of stands out?
I've done lots and lots, and I think that's one of the pressures that bloggers bring on themselves, is that we don't like saying no, and we want to be as helpful as we can. So what we do is we overcommit to these tours and say, right, I'll help you with that one. Oh, I'd love to help with that one too. And then a favourite author comes along. Oh, I'll definitely help with that. And before you know it, you've got like 6 books to read in 3 days, and you're like, no, it's not good. And if you're like me, you put it off to the last minute, because I've got the memory of a goldfish, so I tend to have to review almost as soon as I finish reading the book, or I forget things. So yeah, when you overcommit, it's fun. But I mean, I've been doing that. I was a bit wary initially because it seemed an awful lot of responsibility to be entrusted with someone's book, because you read them on, initially you were reading them because you wanted to read this book, and then before you know it, you're going to ask to read books you don't know anything about, but maybe it's like, oh, if you enjoyed The Girl on the Train, you'll love this one too. Well, all right, okay, well, I'll read that. And then you read it and think, actually, do you know what, it's not anywhere near like what I thought it was going to be. But you're on the promo tour and you're like, I'm going to have to be good at it. But I mean, one of my rules is I'm never negative about books. Every book has got positives.
Yeah.
And even if it's not a book I've particularly liked, there's still a lot of stuff I'll appreciate in it. So part of what I sort of tell myself is that there's a lot of work goes into this. It's not my place to slag it off just because it didn't float my boat. Yeah. Luckily, I've got wise to what I like and what I don't like, so I don't find myself in that situation too often where I'm reading the book thinking, no, this isn't what I signed up for. This is not me. So you generally find good stuff, and if it's a twist or an unexpected development, brilliant. If it's a character that particularly resonates, you can really focus on that. So you can still be very positive about a book, even if perhaps it's not been something you would normally have sought out, and it perhaps isn't one of your favourites. There's still there's so much goes into a book. You can think good things to say. So the blogging community are very supportive of all their authors. So if someone's sticking the knife into a book they didn't like, they tend to find there's a bit of a backlash because there's no need, quite frankly.
Yeah. And there's there's the accusations, oh, you're not being honest. But I think you put it really well there, Gordon. It's about highlighting the parts of the book that worked for you. And to be honest, if I read a book for a blog tour and I really didn't like it, and I thought, I can't put my name to this saying that, go and buy this, it's fab, there was nothing in it that floated my boat, I would go back to the blog tour organizer or the publisher and say, look, I'll do a promo post for you, I'll do an interview with the author, I'll do an excerpt on my blog, or I'll just do a promo post, but it's not, I don't think there is such a thing as a bad book. I just think not all books are for everybody. We can't all like the same things.
We shouldn't all like the same things.
Yeah?
We shouldn't all like the same things. The variety is what makes it fun. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And coming back to your initial thoughts about being a blog tour, touring around with an author, Sharon, has being a blogger led to you being able to meet some of your favourite authors at all, but not on a blog tour?
Yeah, they've all removed the restraining order from me now. I'm allowed near them again. Yes, I think before I blogged, I used to go to book events and I used to go to book festivals, but I'd done it very quietly. I just sort of slipped in and back out again, and used to look at authors thinking, oh my goodness, it's Lynn Anderson, it's Ian Rankin, it's Val McDermid. But now I've got to meet all these people, and you know, it's amazing. But I also want to say it's not just about meeting authors. I've made so many good friends through book blogging, and Gordon being one of them. But you know, amongst other bloggers, I know I send a fiver later, Gordon. I'm only kidding. I've made a lot of really good close friends through that community. But yes, meeting Ian Rankin, meeting Lynn Anderson, Susie Lyons, all my favourite authors, you know, Martina Cole, you know, I just standing in Harrogate having a beer with Martina Cole and Kimberly Chambers, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. And I've been lucky enough that I've been able to chair panels and host events in Waterstones as well. So I've been able to interview some of the authors too. So yeah, it's a huge buzz.
And like you say, whenever you kind of start to meet through my work, I've met some of the authors as well. You do realise that they are just genuinely
Normal
nice,
people.
normal people, and it's great. It's great to meet them, and they have as much anxiety come doing an event for you as what they have whenever you're hosting it and things like that, and things. So they're just kind of down to earth people and lovely folk to kind of meet. And Gordon, I know that you definitely have been to some of our events that we've done in the past, and met some authors there. Is there any authors that you've met that kind of stand out as somebody that's kind of been one of your favourites?
I mean, all the time, it's bizarre. You unexpectedly bump into people you don't expect to see, especially if you're at an event where there's perhaps multiple authors. The one that I get to most frequently is in Stirling every year. It's called Bloody Scotland, and that happens every September. And because Stirling's a nice wee small town centre, you tend to find that everyone's just sort of hanging about. So you're constantly bumping into folk. And sometimes you might even stop and say hello. I mean, I'd come out of, I am shy, much shyer than Sharon, I think. And so I tend not to interject.
I'm shy too.
But I try and force myself to say hello to people, and it's always lovely. But I did the spy thriller writer Mick Herron, whose TV show is coming to Apple TV in the next couple of weeks, is with Gary Oldman. Slough House is going to be called, I think. He did an event in the Albert Hall in Stirling, and then I was hanging about afterwards waiting to catch up with one of my friends, and he walked past, and I was like, oh, lovely to meet you, I think your books are great. And I was just like so embarrassed myself. And he was very nice and very gracious, and he humoured me, but I just thought, you're a grown man, have a normal conversation with your But yeah, sometimes you get a bit dizzy, but it's lovely. And at the same festival, I bumped into a really nice author called Marion Todd, and she stays over Dundee way, and she writes about a really good series set in St Andrews, and had a lovely chat with Marion after one of her panels. And it's just nice to meet these people whose books you read, and you can tell them how much you enjoy their work, and you can have a chat with them, and they'll know me from Twitter, and it's just nice to put a face to a name and have a normal conversation. So it is lovely.
And I would say that for anybody who was listening and thinking, oh, I would love to go to a book festival, but you know, I'd be too nervous to speak to anybody, or you know, you can go to a book festival and just slip in and slip out very quietly and watch from afar. But if you do pluck up the courage to speak to an author, you know, whether it's Ian Rankin, Val McDermid, or somebody, you know, less well known, every single author that I've ever spoke to has been so friendly. I think especially the crime writing community, because it's all crime writing festivals and events that I go to, there's such a friendly group of people. I think they get all the bad stuff out in their books.
Quite a close-knit community as well.
The other thing is, if you do go to a crime event, the chances are, if you're sitting in the audience, you're sitting beside a crime writer. I think the very first event I went to, I ended up sitting beside Alex North, just at the back row of an event. I was like, I know him. And I said, going, oh yeah. And that was about 8 or 9 years ago now. It was like, I don't think he knows who I am yet, but I've definitely sat beside him. So it's lovely. Just, and as you say, they enjoy books too, and they're book lovers too. And they're happy to chat books, unless they're on the way to something, or rather at the bar. But even then, at the bar, I think I was at the bar in Bloody Scotland, and a really nice author called Will Dean was standing beside me, and I was like, oh, hello, I know you. And Will's not to put too fine a point on it, gorgeous. So you're like, I'll just stand beside you and make you look even better, because I look like I've been dragged through a hedge backwards and you're just like the most attractive guy at the bar. So it's really nice just to see people and relaxing and enjoying it and surrounded by their pals, because they, it's I believe quite a singular life sometimes being a writer. So they go to events to meet up with friends they maybe haven't seen for months, and it's such a nice atmosphere. But yeah, you can go and just take it in and enjoy it and not feel you have to participate, because it's entertaining all the time.
Yeah.
So other than the kind of opportunity to meet authors and things like that, has your blogs kind of given you any other opportunities that you may not have kind of thought you would ever have? Like, I know, Sharon, you mentioned there been kind of interviewing people or been kind of hosting panels and things like that sort of stuff. Gordon, I know that you were invited to be in part of a kind of awards, judging an award as well. Want to give us a little bit more about that, Gordon? Because it was quite a major one, wasn't it?
For me, yeah. Sharon does the events, and she does loads of things. I'm always really jealous of the people she gets to meet. I was asked to host one event, and the author who I was hosting, I don't think was particularly enamoured, because his pal had done it previously. So all of a sudden, this blogger was coming along. He's like, "Could we just do what we did last time with my pal?" And we're like, "Okay." So that was my one chance, and it didn't go very well. But I was out of the blue. I got an email from the Bookseller magazine, which is like the trade journal for all things bookish, and they said, "Would you like to judge the Nibbies, as they're called, which is the British Book Awards? You'd be judging the crime and thriller section." I was like, "Oh my word!" And here's some of the other judges, and they were like, "Here's Frankie Bridge, and it's Lenny Henry," and you're like, "You want me in this elite panel?" So I was like, "Oh, absolutely, I'll do that." So there was a huge big announcement. I had to send publicity pictures and everything to the bookseller, and I was just down as a blogger, basically. He's reading the crime and thriller. So we got to judge. This was 2 years ago, I think now. So I had a short list. I've actually still got all the books literally about 2 feet from my hand here. So it was Ian Rankin, Lee Child, Richard Osman's first book, the Robert Galbraith book, the most recent Strike one, and a couple of others as well. And I think everyone thought, "Oh, Richard Osman's blown the world away. This is a shoe-in." So when the panel called the Robert Galbraith book as the winner, there was a bit of a shockwave. It was like, "Oh my word," But it was really interesting to do. And on the panel with me was a couple of a bookseller and publicist, and there was the winner of last year's award, who was my stepsister, the serial killer, I think it was. A buyer for one of the book chains as well. So it was quite a diverse panel, and the discussions were really interesting. And it wasn't just what's the best book. There's a lot more actually feeds into the judging process, and which one captivated you. So I think when the announcement was made, it wasn't just who sold the most copies, it was which book was most fitting. So there's a lot more goes on to it than just picking a winner at random or which book sold the most copies. It was really interesting to see. Hugely flattered to be asked, and I think that was the point. It peaked. So it was lovely to do, and it's just a shame. Had it not been for COVID, I would have been down in London and meeting them all in person, and actually part of a big day of judging and activity. But because we were in lockdown, it was all done via Zoom, so it was quite quick and efficient and to the point. And I was like, only me would get the year where you don't actually get to be jolly down south. But it worked out quite well, because when you're in Airdrie, popping down to London's not exactly so.
They might ask you again in future. You don't know.
They may do.
Sharon, what sort of events have you had the chance to host?
I've hosted events at Waterstones, a lot of Waterstones events. Kimberly Chambers, Lucy Foley, and Lucy Foley, I can't remember who I interviewed her with. Not Douglas Skelton, Michael J. Malone. Always love interviewing Michael J. Malone, the Scottish author. He is absolutely fantastic, and he's a delight to interview. I've done panels at Bloody Scotland, at Newcastle Noir, Butte Noir as well. So yeah, it's just been great. I've interviewed Noel Holton, who's my blogger, author buddy as well. She came up and done her book launch up here, got to interview her. So yeah, it's just been great. Just that opportunity to meet a whole host of authors, some of whom I'm a massive fan, others I'd never read any of their books before. So it's a really good opportunity. And it's so flattering to be asked. I'm like, what, you want me to, you ran out of people or something that you're just asking me? So I've not done it for a wee while. I think just again lockdown like sort of destroyed our
events,
destroyed our events. We had obviously on Zoom and that, but it's not the same. As Gordon says, you go along and that's where you catch up with everybody and you get all that nice buzz and happiness.
Those days hopefully won't be too long till they come back though. So
they're coming back.
You just mentioned Michael J. Malone there. Michael and I used to work together. We used to sit back to back in an office.
Did you?
Yeah, a long time ago. And Michael actually took me to my first book event.
It was
he invited me down.
Did he? Do you know what? The first time as a blogger that I went along to I Write, it was Michael who introduced me. He met me for a coffee and he says, "Come on, I'll take you to meet some folks." So he took me to meet Neil Broadfoot, Mark Leggett, and introduced me to all these folks. He's such a nice guy. He's a lovely guy. I didn't know you worked with him, Gordon.
Yeah, a long time ago. He was at the bank at the time. He calls it the bank. The bank. So he's not there anymore, but I'm still at a different bank. But just, it's bizarre. You're talking about opportunities. It's just funny how sometimes just being in the right place at the right time, you can find you're somewhere. We'd been on holiday down in the south of England as my family, and on the way back past was the Harrogate Festival, which is the big one. And I've never been because it's always in the school holidays and I've got kids and just doesn't work out that way. My wife won't let me go and play with the book people when it's the school holidays. So we were driving back from Brighton area and we were passing and I kind of basically begged, can we take a wee detour? And we stopped off and I got 4 hours, I think, at Harrogate just to sort of touch base, meet a lot of the people who I've only ever spoken to online. It was fantastic. It was lovely to meet all these friends. I mean, they are friends, but you just never get to meet them when you're doing it digitally. And I'd gone along to see Mark Billingham doing a signing and just having a quick hello and whatnot. And his publicist grabbed me and said, do you want to meet with him later? And asked, he's doing a Q&A. Do you want to come along and be part of that? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. So I rocked up at the time that they said, and then the publicist grabbed Mark and said, Mark, here's Gordon. He's your meet and greet. And I'm like, what? So I thought I was coming along to hear him do a Q&A. And he's like, oh, right, lovely. And he was making plans to go for lunch. I'm like, Mark, honestly, if you're going for lunch, go for lunch. It's absolutely fine. I'm just delighted to be able to say hello. But no, we went out and we sat in the grass in the deck chairs and we chatted for half an hour just randomly. People were coming past and I was joining in chats and he was joining in chats. And the night before he'd played with the Fun Loving Crime Writers, which is the band that is Val McDermott, Christopher Brookmeyer, Mark Billingham and a few others. And they'd played and they'd actually had up on stage the First Minister on backing vocals because she was the guest of honour to interview Ian Rankin the next day. So she'd been on stage as a backing singer to the band and he was talking about that to me. Oh, you're Scottish, First Minister's here. Yes. I think I was the only person at Harrogate that didn't actually meet the First Minister that day. But everyone heard Matt saying, oh, you're Scottish. You know that Nicholas? Yes, I know that she's here. Yes, I know I've not seen her yet. So, but it was lovely, and we just had out of the blue. I'm sitting chatting in the sunshine to Mark Billingham, thinking this is strange.
Sounds like a good wee experience. Now, before we kind of put blogging to bed and get on a few book recommendations, I want to kind of see if you've got top 5 tips that we can put out there for anyone who might want to kind of start up vlogging and things like that. So let's see if we can get sort of 5 really good tips for people who want to start up. So Gordon, let's go to you first. What would be kind of a big tip for you?
No need to be negative. We touched on it earlier. I think if you're going to review a book, don't go in with the mindset of I'm tearing this apart.
Magic. Okay. Sharon, what about yourself?
Join Twitter, social media, any social media platform. Everywhere does book reviews now, and engage with social media. get to know people, but not just about sharing your reviews. Get to know people and engage with them, find out a wee bit more about them.
Yeah, actually had the social part of the social media.
I'm not missing that bit.
I know. I'm
Gordon,
not always good at it either.
You got another one?
Yeah, authors really appreciate reviews on book selling websites, whether it be the big Amazon one or Waterson's or even just independent source. So if you are jotting down, even if it's just 2 lines to say, love this book, you should read it, get it on Amazon, get it on Waterson's, get it, share it around, so that, because all publicity to generate hits and likes and raising the profile is appreciated by the authors. So if you've got something nice to say it in lots of different places.
And Sharon, you've got another one?
Don't just do it for the freebies. A lot of people start blogging because they think, oh yeah, that's great, we get free books. You get overwhelmed by free books and you start praying that your postman doesn't actually bring you book post. And B, most of the book bloggers I know review books that they're sent, but they also review books that they buy. And quite often I'll get sent a book, I'll review it, and I go and buy the book because I go to the event and I want to support the author and I want that book signed. So don't do it for freebies.
The
do it for the love of books.
A good thing. Yeah. And has anyone got a burning desire to have the final tip?
The big one that you see a lot is FOMO, fear of missing out. People will get books that you maybe wanted to read and didn't get a chance to read, or you haven't seen it yet, and you think, how come they're getting it and I'm not? That's just how it works. Your turn will come. You'll probably get a book that somebody else wanted. So don't engage in a spat. Don't tag the author and say, oh, I can't believe I didn't get the chance to read this. The author wants you to read it, but they don't want to hear that you're throwing your dummy out the pram. So play nice. There's plenty of books to go around.
I think that's a fantastic 5 tips here. And the final thing I wanted to ask you guys was, obviously these are big book bloggers. Have you ever thought about kind of tackling any more recent trends like book talk and bookstagram, things like that sort of stuff? Sharon?
Yeah, I do it. I do it all. I'm a social media tart. Oh, sorry, can I say that? I'm on Bookstagram. I do book talk. Not very well, I have to say. Book talk I'm not brilliant at, but yeah, I do them all. TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and whatever else they'll throw at us, I'll do it.
And Gordon, what about yourself?
No, I'm the opposite. I am. One of the things we talked about is finding that balance that works for you. And unfortunately, to read, to review, to do my day job, to see my family sometimes, to walk the dog, someone has to give. So I review on my blog. I don't even allow comments on my blog. You can chat to me through Twitter, but some bloggers, I am in awe of how they can keep so many plates spinning at once. For me, it's get a review out there. Share the book love, because that's what I do. I'm telling you how great these books are, but I don't always have time to come back and say, oh, what did you like about it, and did you like that bit in chapter 12? I wish I could do that, maybe when I retire, but I'm still quite a way away from that. So yeah, I'm very much on. It's on my blog. I'll talk about it on Twitter, but I'm afraid I'm not many other places.
Yeah, there you go. So you'll be able to find Sharon about in different places, but Gordon's sticking to Twitter and his blog only. So there you go. Now, before we get into a few book recommendations, Sharon, do you want to give us a little bit of a plug for your own books? You have written 2 books, am I right, so far? Sins of the Father and You Need Me. So do you want to tell us a little bit about both of them?
Okay. Sins of the Father came out in, I've lost all my years now. Sins of the Father came out in lockdown 2020. Dark psychological thriller about Rebecca, who marries her husband not because she loves him, but because she wants to destroy him. And You Need Me has got a little twist about a library in it. There's a librarian that I'm sure you would hope is not working in your library, Chris. And You Need Me is, I think it's about, I would say it's about loneliness, isolation, and some revenge. But both, if I was to say anything about both my books and everything that I write, really, they are dark. They're about dysfunctional families, broken societies and broken systems, because I am absolutely fascinated about what motivates people to do bad things to other folk.
Oh, there you go. So if you do fancy them, they should be available in our library sometime soon.
Thank you.
They will be kind of hitting our shelves in the next few months, so watch out for those and request them if you want. And I'm sure Sharon
Thank you.
would love to get your feedback on them as well.
I would love to hear what folk think.
Now for the big part, which the kind of book recommendations from you guys, because obviously you read tons of books, you get given them by publishers, and also, like you say, buy them and the ones that you like and things like that. So what books has really been catching your eye recently that you've read, and have you had any kind of advanced reading copies that are maybe books that some of our readers should be kind of watching out, coming out for in the next few months? So Sharon, what's kind of caught your eye recently?
Recently, the most recently published one that I've read is Craig Robertson, again, Scottish crime writer, and this is a standalone, The Undiscovered Deaths of Grace McGill, and I think that only came out a couple of weeks ago, and it's about a death cleaner, a cleaner who cleans up after unexplained deaths. And I really can't say very much else about it for fear of giving away spoilers. I hate that when I've read a book and then because I'm used to talking to people who have read the same books, you forget about spoilers. And another one would be S.E. Lyons. So that's Susie Lyons, writes as S.E. Lyons, and her most recent one is The Baby Shower. Susie is probably one of my favourite psychological thriller writers. She writes standalones, really relatable characters and situations that you could imagine yourself in. So they are my two recent ones.
Gordon, what about yourself? What would be the kind of big recommendations for you?
I think you'd be copying my homework again because I like Good Girl as well.
Sorry, Gordon.
I would say look out absolutely for a series by Neil Lancaster.
Oh, definitely.
The first book's not long out in paperback. It's called Dead Man's Grave. And the second book in the series is called The Blood Tide, and that's out this week in hardback. And Neil's got more on the way because he announced today that there's another 3 books been signed up. And the lead character is a cop who's called Max Craigie, and he's basically investigating corruption within Police Scotland. But the books Neil writes a really good, high intense thriller.
Yeah.
So the story drifts up and down Scotland. There's a really good supporting cast, and it's one of these ones you're never quite sure who you can trust. So it's absolutely, I'd recommend those. They're quite easy to pick up because they're in all good bookshops and in all good libraries. So
fantastic. And is there any book that's sitting on your to be read pile that's kind of like burning to its way to the top at all, or that you kind of can't wait to get into?
I've got Will Dean Firstborn. I've got a copy of that. When's that coming out? Later this year, so I've got a copy of that I really need to get round to reading. But I'm doing the Bloody Scotland Book Club next month, so I'm going to have to wait until I read those 3 books. So.
Fantastic. And Gordon, what about you? Have you got one on your to be read pile that's you're desperate to get to?
I've kind of got one here I don't actually want to read because I've got a very special, and I'm going to hold it up to the camera even though nobody can see it on the podcast. It's new Ben Aronovich Rivers of London book.
I saw this picture on Twitter.
A very exclusive limited edition copy to read, and
it's very nice.
It's a kind of a crime come fantasy series, which I do enjoy an awful lot, so I'm quite excited to get into that. So, and Ben's coming on a mini tour of the UK soon. He's going to be in Glasgow, so I'm hoping to try and get along and say hello as well. But that's kind of my nice one sitting here.
It's a very nice looking book, and if anyone does want to see it, it's on Gordon's Twitter account. I think, if I remember correctly, that's where I saw it. I think
I did share a picture because it was lush. It was a very pretty book. The other one I've got, which is due soon, the author of Blood Orange. This will be her 3rd novel, and she always writes quite a gripping psychological thriller. So that came in the other day too, which I'm excited to get started on too. So.
Fantastic. So That's some fantastic little book recommendations here from Sharon and Gordon. And if you want to find out or follow it for more recommendations for them, you can check out their blogs, which Gordon's is at www.grabthisbook.net, and you can find Sharon's at www.chapterinmylife.wordpress.com, and you can also follow them on Twitter, which is at grabthisbook and at sbearden as well, so you'll be able to follow them on there. And Sharon can be found on various other social medias if you can track her down as well. So
you'll be able to track me down, don't worry.
Thank you very much, guys, for joining us on the book on our podcast. It's been fantastic talking to you and getting a right insight into some of the stuff. In terms of the library service, we do have a few weekend service updates to give you and for you to look out for. Let's Go Easter is just round the corner because it is almost Easter time, and we have got some great activities for kids happening, lots of Easter book bug sessions and things like that, and you can find out the whole lineup at www.culturenl.co.uk/festivals/Let's Go. And on the other big one that we've got is the World Poetry Day, sorry. My cough's finally taken over near the end of the podcast. I've did well so far. We launched a poetry competition where you can get your poem published on National Poetry Day, which is in October, on our BorrowBox app, and you can find out more about that if you go to www.culturenl.co.uk/poetry competition. But that's just about all for this podcast today for us, and if you have enjoyed it, please do leave us some feedback by using the hashtag FLB podcast or by dropping us a wee email to librarypodcast@northland.gov.uk. But that's about all for me, guys. Thank you very much, Gordon and Sharon, for joining us, and we hope you've enjoyed listening.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.